previously on Nerd Talk.
I would love that. I would read if they made like comic books.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely sounds like comic books I would read in a
Yeah,
heartbeat.
it's so much interesting stuff, and you just think about what would happen in the world
Hmm.
if it crazy stuff went off, and the interesting part is like who started it. That's always
Yeah.
the question in the game, like who started it. And in the
Hmm.
show it kind of makes you think Vault-Tec did, because
Yeah.
they wanted to put everybody in the vaults and do these experiments.
Hmm.
So
It sounds like
they
they're kind of have
yeah.
their fingers in
So
all the
they
pots. Hmm.
instigated these
Hmm.
the bombs going off and everybody having to go into shelters or whatever. And I'm like, that's crazy if they did that. And then they didn't even live. Like a
Yeah, maybe it
majority of
got
them.
away from them. Maybe it
Yeah.
wasn't something where they were trying to make it that bad, but
Yeah.
it became that bad.
They wanted to get people to the vaults, but they didn't want the world to be over too. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but that's the only reason you go to vaults.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys, it's me, Silver, and I'm starting a little reading corner here. I'm probably gonna do it in shorts or a very short form video, but I'm not gonna show every bit of reading that I'm gonna do here in the book. Maybe I'll add that to Patreon later, but I will be stopping to discuss parts that I really like and parts that I think have interest with the future of the story. And just because I love Harry Potter and I love reading the books, that doesn't condone any actions of the author. I believe once the story's out there, it belongs to everybody, not just them. So I just want to share my love of this story, and maybe one day we'll share some fan fiction and all that. But I was just trying to do more things that I love, and I hope you're here for the journey. That's all. So let's get to it. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Yes, I'm in the US by, JKR. She has all rights, and she reserves all rights. And these illustrations are the illustrations of Minifora, Mina, and Eduardo Lima. But I just want to go through these illustrated books. I haven't really dived into the full versions of them, and I really want to, so I figured why not do it here. But yeah, we got some Dumbledore, some Hagrid, that's Minerva. Harry's on the stoop of number 4 Privet Drive. And that's the beginning of chapter 4. It's the motorbike over here. It's the beginning of chapter 1. We got the London Underground. We got a cat reading a map. We got donuts, letters, owls. So very relevant illustration here. But chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large moustache. Mr. Dursley was thin and blond, and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbours. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. They didn't think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mr. Dursley pretended that she didn't have a sister, because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursleyish as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbours would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son too, but they had never even seen him. The boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. So, first page, we're starting the book with the Dursleys. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley. I don't think they said their names yet, but they talked a lot about them. They live on number 4 Privet Drive. They were very, very normal. So to be Dursley was to be normal. But what is normal? So Mr. Dursley is big and beefy. Doesn't really have any neck. This And he had a very large mustache. He's a director of a firm called Grunnings. And then Mrs. Dursley had twice the amount of neck, so she has Mr. Dursley's neck. She's thin and blonde, and she spends a lot of her time looking over the fence at the neighbors. So she's a Karen, probably. She likes to spy on the neighbors and probably tell on them to the police. But Mrs. Dursley has a sister, the Potters. So we get mentioned on the Potters right here on the first page. They have a son. So the Dursleys, Mr. and Mrs. Dursley have a son. Mrs. Potter have a son. And they're around the same age. But they don't want anything to do with them. They had a falling out years and years ago. Because they had met in several years. But they're avoiding them because they are strange and unusual. Because they avoid anything strange and unusual. So it makes you want to think, like, what is strange about them? Because right now we don't know. We don't know anything about what's strange, you know? So they think their boy's the finest boy on earth. And Mrs. Dursley spends all her time spying on the neighbors. Mr. Dursley works at Grunnings as a director. And the Potters are strange and have their own son as well. Alright, next page. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull grey Tuesday, our story starts. There was nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Dursley gossiped away happily as she wrestled the screaming Dudley into his high chair. None of them noticed a large tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, Mr. Dursley picked up his briefcase, pecked Mrs. Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal at the walls. "Little tyke," chortled Mr. Dursley as he left the house. He got into his car and backed out of number 4's drive. It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar. A cat reading a map. For a second, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he had seen. Then he jerked his head around and looked again. There was a tabby cat standing on the corner of Privet Drive, but there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back at Mr. Dursley. As Mr. Dursley drove around the corner up the road, he watched the cat in his mirror. So Mr. Dursley's off to work, and he starts noticing strange things. That's page 2. It's Tuesday. It's a dull grey Tuesday, which is famously known as it not being a Tuesday in 1981, when this would have been. Well, let's look at my phone. What day's the Tuesday? Because this is after Halloween. They died on Halloween. Check what the day was. Alright, so October 1981, Halloween was a Saturday. And so the Tuesday after would have been the 3rd, which is not the next day. So let's say the date was right. Let's say it's Tuesday after Halloween. Everyone's found out by now. Everyone's celebrating something. We're not there in the chapter yet, but we're talking about it's Tuesday after Halloween. Everyone's going to be in the street celebrating. Halloween that year was a Saturday. Yeah, so they died October 31st, 1981, which is a Saturday. It was at night time though, I think. Then Hagrid and Sirius showed up the next day, so Harry was in there by himself for some hours, I would say. So maybe it was close to midnight on the 31st. And then by the 1st, they found him. Hagrid spent all day driving across the country from Godric's Hollow to Privet Drive. So it says Godric's Hollow is in the West Country near Bristol, while Privet Drive is in Surrey, south of London. A car trip between the two locations would take about 3 hours, but that's during traffic. He's flying in the sky. So it shouldn't take him 3 hours. You know, that's neither here nor there. Let's move on. So they didn't hear about the Potters till Tuesday, which is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 3 days after Halloween. Well, they didn't hear about it till Wednesday because he ends up on the doorstep Tuesday night. So they didn't hear about till Wednesday, which is 4 days later. So, but it keeps talking about strange and mysterious things will be happening. So that's telling us that this normal life we're living right now in this book is not going to be what happens in the book. It's teasing that there's going to be mysterious and strange things happening, interesting things. So Mr. Dursley, he picked out his most boring tie, and they have their most perfect son is a screaming tantrum thrower who is disobedient. And then we're starting to notice owls. There's an owl fluttering past the window. It's 8:30 when Mr. Dursley leaves to go to work, and he says a little tight because Dudley's throwing a tantrum. He sees a cat reading a map at the corner of Privet Drive, and that would be McGonagall. She's looking for Privet Drive. She has a map, but she's on the road already, so why is she still looking at the map? Good question. For a second, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he'd seen, and he jerked his head around, and Miss McGonagall's a tabby cat, and she's on the corner reading a map, which is peculiar. Then they stare at each other. The map's gone, because McGonagall probably notices that he's looking, and then he drove up the road, still watching the cat. So let's go on to the next page. It was now reading the sign that said Privet Drive. No, looking at the sign. Cats can't read maps or signs. Mr. Dursley gave a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he drove toward town, he thought of nothing except a large order of drills he was hoping to get that day. But on the edge of town, drills were driven out of his mind by something else. As he sat in the usual morning traffic jam, he couldn't help noticing there seemed to be a lot of strangely dressed people about. People in cloaks. Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people who dressed in funny clothes, the get-ups you saw in young people. He supposed that this was some stupid new fashion. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. His eyes fell on a huddle of those weirdos standing quite close by. They were whispering excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them weren't young at all. Why, that man had to be older than he was, wearing an emerald green cloak. The nerve of him! But then it struck Mr. Dursley that this was probably some silly stunt, that people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. The traffic moved on, and a few minutes later Mr. Dursley arrived in the Grunnings parking lot, his mind back on drills. Mr. Dursley sat with his back to the window in his office at the 9th floor. If he hadn't, he might have found it harder to concentrate on drills that morning. He didn't see the owl swooping past in broad daylight, though people down in the street did. They pointed and gazed open-mouthed as owl after owl sped overhead. Most of them had never seen an owl, even at night time. Mr. Dursley, however, had a perfectly normal owl-free morning. He yelled at 5 different people. He made several important telephone calls and shouted a bit more. He was in a very good mood until lunchtime, when he thought he'd scratch his legs and walk across the road to buy himself a bun from the bakery. He'd forgotten all about the people in cloaks until he passed a group of them next to the baker's. He eyed them angrily as he passed. He didn't know why, but they made him uneasy. Okay, next page. All about Mr. Dursley. He's gone to work. He's thinking about drills. How much can you think about drills? Like, what all is there to think about drill? Like, what metal you're making it? What length? Like, is it Phillips head or not? Is it have interchangeable heads? I mean, I guess there's lots of things. But yes, he's watching the cat in his rearview mirror. It doesn't have the map anymore, but it's looking at the sign. So she was looking at the map. She hadn't seen the sign yet that said Privet Drive, but she's made it to Privet Drive early in the morning, 8:30. She's already at the street. This cat, who we know as McGonagall. Some people don't. If you're reading this with me for the first time, I'm sorry for the spoilers, but I assume you are a super fan like me if you're on it like this. So Mr. Dursley, he's like, okay, forget about this cat. It's crazy that I saw a cat with the map and reading a sign. I like normal things. Let me get back to normal things, which is drills. Drills. Thinking about drills all day is normal. And then he saw people in cloaks, all slittered along his route to work, There's people in funny clothes, wizards, as we know, in their cloaks, littered along the road, some stupid new fashion, or they're collecting for something. And he's like, oh, there's even older people dressed funny. That's crazy. Like, people can express themselves as they want in any age, as long as they're not being vulgar. But, it's unnormal, so he doesn't like it. So he gets to the traffic, he gets to Grunnings. His office is on the 9th floor. He's facing away from the window, so he doesn't see all the owls. So there's just piles and piles of owls all over the city, sending letters, because that's how they send letters in the wizarding world. And so they're sending out news wizard to wizard via owl. Or maybe the papers are going out via owl or something. Or there's a reason for all these owls. But people are drummed up about the news that Voldemort's gone. But Mr. Dursley doesn't notice all this hubbub with the owls. He's facing the wrong way. Then he's yelling. He's having a good time being the director at work. And then at lunchtime, he's like, I'm going to go take a walk to get me a bun at the bakery. And he had forgotten all about the people. But he passes a group of them. They're still here midday. They're just out all day in cloaks, spilling the secret of the wizarding world all day. Just, why does it take you all day? Like, go to Leaky Cauldron, go to a house party. Why are you out in the street? It doesn't make sense. It's crazy. Why are you out in the street? Yeah, but he's PO'd about him, and while he's going to get some bakery goods. Alright, next page. The bunch were whispering excitedly too, and he couldn't see a single collecting tin. It was on his way back past them, clutching a large donut in a bag, that he caught a few words of what they were saying. The Potters! That's right! That's what I heard! Yes, their son Harry! Mr. Dursley stopped dead. Fear flooded him. He looked back at the whisperers as if he wanted to say something to them, but thought better of it. He dashed back across the road, hurried up to his office, snapped at his secretary not to disturb him, seized his telephone, and had almost finished dialing his home number when he changed his mind. He put the receiver back down and stroked his mustache, thinking no. He was being stupid. Potter wasn't such an unusual name. He was sure there were lots of people called Potter who had a son called Harry. Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. He'd never even seen the boy. It might have been Harvey or Harold. There was no point in worrying Mrs. Dursley. She always got so upset at any mention of her sister. He didn't blame her. If he'd had a sister like that, but all the same, those people in cloaks. He found it a lot harder to concentrate on drills that afternoon, and when he left the building at 5 o'clock, he was still so worried that he walked straight into someone just outside the door. Sorry, he grunted. As the tiny old man stumbled and almost fell, it was a few seconds before Mr. Dursley realized that the man was wearing a violet cloak. He didn't seem at all upset at being almost knocked to the ground. On the contrary, his face split into a wide smile, and he was in a squeaky voice that made passersby stare. Don't be sorry, my dear sir, for nothing could upset me today. Rejoice, for you know who has gone at last. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating this happy, happy day. And the old man hugged Mr. Dursley around the middle and walked off. Okay. It's been 8 something till 5, and there's still people in Surrey just hanging around in cloaks. Why? Why are they on the street? Like, yeah, okay, Voldemort's gone. Great. But why are you on the regular Muggle street, talking to Muggles in your wizard clothes, not even dressed as a Muggle? Why? Like, there has to be more wizarding places to go to celebrate. But apparently not. And so he's on his way back from the bakery, not with a bun, but a donut. And he hears them talk about the Potters. And he hears them say Harry. And so he's like, oh, I don't even know if my nephew is called Harry. It could be Harvey or Harold. Whenever I read a fan fiction, I always write that his full name is like Harold or Harrison, just because he doesn't even know if his name's Harry. Maybe his name isn't Harry. Maybe he has a longer form of his name. So that's always fun. But yeah, he gets back to the office. He's like, don't talk to me, to the secretary. And then he picks up the phone. He's like, I gotta call Miss Dursley to say what's up. Have they said their names? They have to have, right? Just Mr. and Mrs. Dursley so far. Alright, so he picks up the phone. He thinks better of it. He's like, Petunia doesn't want to hear about this, and I'm not even sure if they're talking about the actual people. So he's like, don't worry about it. But then when he's leaving, he couldn't concentrate on drills the rest of the day. And then when he's leaving, he runs into another cloaked person who's like, be happy. You know who's gone. Everybody should be celebrating. All day out in the street. Like, they don't even have drinks. He would have mentioned if they had drinks or like something in celebration. They're just around gossiping on the street, which is wild to me. But yeah, he hugs them and calls him a muggle. They don't care about the statute of secrecy right now. They're like, whatever. We're happy that you know who's dead. So we get a little picture of Vernon and Petunia. In here, they're both blonde. So they're not blonde in the movie. And I figure one of them is blonde. Because in the other picture book I have, Vernon has dark hair. And only she has blonde hair. And then Dudley has blonde hair. But we don't know the names yet. So they're home watching TV. They hear about owls and shooting stars. That's what this picture is depicting there. So let's move on. This is page 6, but it's like the 4th page for us. 1, 2. It's page 5. Mr. Dursley stood rooted in the spot. He had been hugged by a complete stranger. He also thought he'd been called a muggle, whatever that was. He was rattled. He hurried to his car and set off for home, hoping he was imagining things, which he'd never hoped before because he didn't approve of imagination. As he spilled into the driveway of number 4, the first thing he saw, and it didn't improve his mood, was the tabby cat he'd spotted that morning. It was now sitting on its garden wall. He was sure it was the same one. It had the same markings around its eyes. "Shoo!" said Mr. Dursley loudly. The cat didn't move. It just gave him a stern look. Was this normal cat behavior? Mr. Dursley wondered, trying to pull himself together. He let himself into the house. He was still determined not to mention anything to his wife. Mrs. Dursley had had a nice, normal day. She told him over dinner all about Mrs. Next Door's problems with her daughter and how Dudley had learned a new word, won't. Mr. Dursley tried to act normally. When Dudley had been put to bed, he went into the living room in time to catch the last report on the evening news. And finally, birdwatchers everywhere have reported that the nation's owls have been behaving very unusually today. Although owls normally hunt at night, and we hardly ever see are hardly ever seen in daylight, there have been hundreds of sightings of these birds flying in every direction since sunrise. Experts are unable to explain why the owls have suddenly changed their sleeping pattern. The newscaster allowed himself a grin. Most mysterious. And now, over to Jim McGuffin with the weather. Going to be any more showers of owls today, Jim? "Well, Ted," said the weatherman, "I don't know about that, but it's not only the owls that have been acting oddly today. Viewers as far apart as Kent, Yorkshire, and Dundee have been phoning in all to tell me that instead of rain I promised yesterday, they've had a downpour of shooting stars. Perhaps people are celebrating bonfire night early. It's not till next week, folks, but I can promise a wet night tonight." Okay, I was off a bit on that reading, but it is what it is. He comes home, the cat's there. So he's learned the word muggle. He hurries home. He sees the cat, and he doesn't approve of imagination. So McGonagall's been here all day. She found the road. She's been sitting at Privet Drive all day because Hagrid told her that Dumbledore would be there later. Or maybe he didn't say when he would be there, but she's been sitting there all day. Why? Did she bring something to eat? But, yeah. She gave Dursley a stern look, and he's like, this isn't normal. All unnormal things have been happening today. This cat, these people in cloaks, owls. He hasn't heard about the owls, but owls. And then Mrs. Dursley has been talking about next door neighbor problem with her daughter, and that Dudley has said won't. And then they hear the news. There have been owl sightings, and then there's been shooting stars. So they've been sending off owls and going off with their wands, like pew, pew, like shooting off guns, practically with their wands instead. And so the news is noticing that strange things are happening. And McGonagall's been sitting all day on this garden wall, on this brick wall. So, but Vernon, Mr. Dursley seemed really freaked out about what's going on. Wants to tell Mrs. Dursley, but doesn't, because I think he's a little afraid of her, which is odd. So let's go on. Mr. Dursley sat frozen in his armchair. Shooting stars all over Britain, owls flying by daylight, mysterious people in cloaks all over the place, and a whisper about the Potters. Mrs. Dursley came into the living room carrying 2 cups of tea. It was no good. He'd have to say something to her. He cleared his throat nervously. Petunia, dear, you haven't heard from your sister lately, have you? As he had expected, Mrs. Dursley looked shocked and angry. After all, they normally pretended she didn't have a sister. No, she said sharply. Why? Funny stuff on the news, Mr. Dursley mumbled. Owls shooting stars. And there's a lot of funny-looking people in town today. So, snapped Mrs. Dursley. Well, I just thought maybe it was something to do with, her crowd. So yeah, Mrs. Dursley snaps every time they mention the Potters. So he's afraid about that snap. He's afraid of upsetting her, which I guess means he's a good husband. But also, which tell you how much of a red flag she is, because she's like snapping. He can't mention what he wants to mention to her, so that's a red flag in any relationship. But yeah, so he hears about the strange things happening on the news, and he's like, I have to tell her, I have to say, hey, have you heard from your sister? Because I've heard some strange stuff happening today. So let's go on. Mrs. Dursley sipped her tea through pursed lips. Mr. Dursley wondered whether he dared tell her he'd heard the name Potter. He decided he didn't dare. Instead, he said as casually as he could, their son, he'd be about Dudley's age now, wouldn't he? I suppose so, said Mrs. Dursley stiffly. What's his name again? Howard, isn't it? Harry, nasty common name, if you'd ask me. Oh, yes, said Mr. Dursley, his heart sinking horribly. Yes, I quite agree. He didn't say another word on the subject as they went upstairs to bed. While Mrs. Dursley was in the bathroom, Mr. Dursley crept to the bedroom window and peered down into the front garden. The cat was still there. It was staring down Privet Drive as though it was waiting for something. Was he imagining things? Could all this have anything to do with the Potters? If it did, if it got out that they were all related to a pair of, well, he didn't think he could bear it. The Dursleys got into bed. Mrs. Dursley fell asleep quickly, but Mr. Dursley lay awake, turning it all over in his mind. His last comforting thought before he fell asleep was that even if the Potters were involved, there was no reason for them to come near him and Mrs. Dursley. The Potters knew very well that he and Petunia thought about them and their kind. He couldn't see how he and Petunia could be mixed up in anything that might be going on. He yawned and turned over. It couldn't affect them. How very wrong he was. Mr. Dursley might have been drifting into an uneasy sleep, but the cat on the wall outside was showing no signs of sleepiness. It was sitting as still as a statue, its eyes fixed unblinkingly on the far corner of Privet Drive. It didn't so much as quiver when the car door slammed on the next street, nor when the 2 owls swooped overhead. In fact, it was nearly midnight before the cat moved at all. So it was nearly midnight, and Hagrid hasn't showed up. Dumbledore's not here yet. So they wanted to make sure people were well asleep. And if my theory is right, that it was nearly midnight when the Potters were killed on Halloween, it's literally 4 days later. before they show up at Privet Tribe with Harry. What's been going on? Let's think about what probably happened. So Hagrid met Sirius at the destroyed house where Harry was. I'm hoping it wasn't 3 days later. It had to be right away. So it's pretty obvious that this time frame's off. That it's a glitch in the story. It's a plot hole or whatever. Let's say Monday had been Halloween. It's now Tuesday midnight. Even so, even if it's midnight to midnight, it's been all day. What's been happening? So Hagrid went to get Harry, and he took all day. I guess he took him home or something. Because he didn't just go to Godric's Hollow and then drive to Privet Drive, because it says it only takes 3 hours in regular traffic. So he had to have had Harry all day, or he didn't get there until 3 hours before he was showing up. But they would have had to go get Harry right away, because the Fidelius charm was done. Otherwise nobody could find the house. That's a good question too. Why is the Fidelius charm done? If Peter's the secret keeper, he's not dead. Well, they would assume Peter's dead. Or maybe just Hagrid always knew the secret. Because, okay, let's talk about this. Fidelius charm, the secret keeper has to tell the person. No. They can have a note on paper. I'm thinking about when they were with the Order of Phoenix. They can have a note with the paper from the secret keeper that says this number 12 Grimmauld Place is here. Or 13 Grimmauld Place. It's 12 or 13. I'm thinking it's 12. So the secret keeper writes it down, gives it to somebody. They can show this note to somebody else, and now that person knows too. So at some point, Peter would have had to told Sirius, Dumbledore, and or given it to Sirius as a piece of paper, and then Sirius told Dumbledore, Hagrid, where it was, because the Fidelius charm only fails when the person dies. The secret stays in them. So, of course, Voldemort found the house because Peter told him. And so they blew up the house, but it would still be a secret. So now, how did Hagrid get there? Unless Hagrid already knew the secret, or got told the secret at some point before all this happened. And then Sirius would know the secret, obviously, because he visits them while they're under secret. And then Dumbledore never goes there, because Hagrid goes. So at some point, Hagrid learns the secret and is able to go there. So maybe that's why Dumbledore sent Hagrid, because Dumbledore didn't know the secret. But if Dumbledore performed the Fidelius charm, they never said who performed the charm, because it's very complicated. But if Dumbledore had performed the charm, and they made the secret keeper Sirius, but then maybe Lily or somebody changed the secret keeper to Peter, and then that's when it all went down. So Dumbledore would know because he created the secret. But either way, Dumbledore doesn't go. He sends Hagrid. But how does Hagrid know? Because the secret wouldn't be gone. So how does anybody else find the house? Maybe because who is protecting died? The secret fails or something? I don't know. But back to this chapter. So yeah, we finally learn her name's Petunia. I still don't think that we've heard the word Vernon yet. So we learn her name's Petunia. We know that McGonagall's been sitting here all day. And then he asks Petunia, what is Harry's name? Howard. So we got Harvey, Harold, Howard now. No, Harry. It's Harry. And then, so he's like, oh, yes, it's a nasty common name. But then he stopped talking about it because he's afraid. So, and then he looks out the window, he sees the cat still there, and he's like, I must be imagining things. Whatever. Even if something is happening with the Potters, it won't come down to them. So, which is crazy. Of course, it's coming to them. And if the Potters had lived, probably they wouldn't have had anything to do with them. They would have gone into hiding again, and they would have kept Harry. Or if it was up to them, they would have sent Harry somewhere else. They wouldn't have sent him to the Dursleys. That is for sure. This is Dumbledore's decision to send him to the Dursleys. So they're gone. And Dumbledore doesn't know what horrible people they are, even though McGonagall tries to tell him. He's decided that Harry needs to be in the Muggle world, and he can put a blood charm on the house, blood protection in the house, because Petunia and Dudley have his blood, the same blood as his mother. So we're past midnight now. So what's gonna happen? We got Dumbledore here, past midnight. He's taking the light from the street. And we got the cat, which is McGonagall. Hey nerds, it's over. Hey. So yeah, this is a one-off with just me in it. Little things got in the way of what we were doing in the past few weeks. Death in my family, my Ray's best daughter's birthday. So just things happened and we weren't able to get together to keep recording. We will get back to it on Thursday, but for today, this is half of me rereading Harry Potter, the illustrated pop-up book version of it, and just having real long thoughts about what's going on in the story, how things relate to what will happen in the future, and things like that. So this is the first half of the book before we get to the pure, more magical side of the chapter. So I just want to say thanks so much for hanging out and joining me. What am I nerding out about? I'm nerding out about having a consistent glucose monitor, which today, my highest spike today so far has been, not the highest it's been, I had a 99 once. That's after I had one piece of bread. So that's what I'm nerding out about. I got the Lingo one, I guess it is. Yeah, I got the Lingo continuous glucose monitor because my AC one is in the pre-diabetic range. So I just wanted to see what spikes what. And so that's what I'm nerding out about right now. And in the future, we'll be back to the regular scheduled program. I am going to continue this book series. But separate from the podcast. But today it is a podcast episode, but I will probably do shorts, probably one page at a time, discussing that page in short form, most likely. But I wanted to do a longer form to start, just so you had something here for Monday to hang out with us with. So thanks so much for hanging out and watching us, and let me know down in the comments below what you think about my theories, my thoughts on half of the first chapter here so far, and just, what you love about Harry Potter, what you're nerding out about. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much.